I am Alpha and Omega. Happy birthday, honey. I'm your daddy, sweetheart. I don't want you to follow me. I love you.
My dad's previous tape note echoed in my mind. Would he be angry? When I did find him, not if, but when, would he be angry that I even came to look? When I did think about it, I didn't care. He's my dad. I needed to find him. With my mind made up, I put on the jacket Butch gave me and left Megaton in search of the radio station, and hopefully my dad. Before I left, I wandered into the local bar owned by Jenny Stahl. Curiosity took over me as I spotted a back room. Walking into it, I found a computer and a safe. I looked around, and against my better judgment and what my dad had taught me, I hacked into the computer. That was easy. The safe clicked open, and shortly afterwards I removed all the 300 bottle caps from its confinement. I would need it more. That's what I told myself. That's what I justified to myself. I wandered the wasteland, my head still having trouble with the sights and sounds. It was so strange, so surreal. The dirt, tossed and swept up by the wind that was barely there. The trees dead and brittle. Plants naked and just as brittle as the trees. Box and broken down cars were the main decorations in this world. It was not what I was expecting, and really, what was I expecting? I took notice of the empty houses and rifled through them for anything useful that may have been left behind. I tried to ignore the skeletons that lurked in some of the buildings, their last moments immortalised forever, doing whatever task they were doing before their deaths. Some things were useful, like a book about sneaking. Other things were junk, bits of metal that I was slowly building a collection of. As I continued walking, I came across a big building. A body hung from its rafters. I didn't want to meet the people who did that. I walked closer, and as I did, an explosion sounded, and a man with a gun soon turned his attention to me and began shooting. He was not willing to talk, and soon I began beating him with a bat until he was dead. I was numb. I had killed another person, and the more I thought about it, the more I knew I would talk myself into a pit. It was best not to think of it for now. I could sit and stew later. I walked into the building, hoping to find something there. The building was large. Trolleys littered the corner of the entranceway. Old papers and posters clung to the floor. It appeared to have been a grocery store at one point, before the war, I assume. I spotted people wandering on top of the aisles, their backs towards me. If I could hazard a guess, they would not be friendly either. Kneeling to the floor, I wandered towards a small room and began my new hobby of rummaging through everything, hoping to find something that would be useful. There was not much, but I did find some ammo, and that was quickly snatched up by me. I could put those to good use. I was soon smacked around the back of the head by a man wearing a mask. I never heard him sneaking up behind me, too engrossed in rummaging through boxes to even notice. I fumbled for my gun and drew it. I didn't know which gun I drew. I panicked and needed to protect myself. Once the rounds were shot, the man disintegrated into dust. This gun was powerful. Very powerful, and I was starting a body count. I gathered my thoughts again and left the room, wandering back through the abandoned shopping centre, careful not to be detected by the others. I just killed one of their men. They would not look at me kindly, not that they did to begin with.
Oh, this is gonna be fun. It's go time.
My luck soon ran out, and I was spotted. I quickly took out the man before he could take me out, and made quick work of the others that followed. I quickly made my way into another room and did the same thing I had done in the previous. That room was not as exciting, albeit some ammo and grenades. The next room, however, had a Protectron. Just like the one in Megaton, a computer sat next to the terminal, and I made quick work hacking into that. With a few quick taps, I freed the robot. It immediately got to work and began hunting down the other people in the grocery store.
Security breach detected. Please stand back.
I scavenged a few more items left in the room, with a peace of mind that I wouldn't be bothered anymore in this place. not with the Protectron stalking the aisles and making quick work of anyone daring to step a toe into its sights. Once I had my fill with the building, I left to begin my way back to Galaxy News radio station. I was sidetracked enough. On the other hand, I couldn't have imagined Dad actually did wander too far from the radio station. From what Moriarty said, it was important he went there. No, I was certain Dad would still be there, even with my detour. I was attacked further, and again I disposed of them just as quickly. I soon found an old metro station, and even soon after that, a panicked man approached me.
Got to get away! They're burning everything!
He was scared of what I didn't know. And when I tried questioning him further, he just ran into a panic, saying everything was burnt down. But he did spit out where he lived through jitters and panicked words. Sighing, I decided to help him. Dad could wait a little longer. He was at Galaxy News Radio, and I assumed it was a safe place. Against my better judgment, I turned back the way I came and began making my way over to the place that man spoke of. An annoyance, but my gut told me I couldn't not help this person. If I could help at least one person while looking for Dad, then I would be happy, and maybe Dad would be proud of me too. As I journeyed forward, I ran into an elderly woman at a place called Wilhelm's Wolf. I never got her name, but she offered me ammo. I gave her some of my old stuff that would just slow me down and went on my way. It was nice talking to her. She was pleasant, and I could only hope even more people as I met on was just as nice. The walk was quick, and I noticed when I got closer to the place, I could smell smoke. A sign saying "Welcome to Grey Ditch" became visible, and an ant. The ant was huge and looked different to the other ants I'd come across. Fire scattered around the destroyed town. It looked fresh. I could only assume this is what the scared man was talking about. I entered the house and looked around for any sign of life. I wasn't surprised when I didn't find any. In the house, there was a bed. It was in good condition. A few stains here and there, but still usable. While there was no life at the moment, the contents of the house made it seem like it was lived in recently. But where were the residents now? That was a mystery. A sinking feeling told me they were dead. I soon found a kid by himself. He was scared and said the monsters would get him.
Those monsters, they're gonna get me.
He begged for me to make it stop. He said I looked stronger than most adults and asked if I could help. He also wanted me to find his papa. I couldn't refuse that. I was also looking for my dad, and I would not leave a kid without knowing where his dad was. It wasn't right. I agreed to find his dad, and he told me where he would be hiding. So my search for the kid's dad began. It didn't go smoothly. The ants around this place spat fire. I had heard of fire ants, but this was just insane. It wasn't long until I found a locked shed, and next to that, a house. Entering the house, I was soon greeted with a grisly sight. A man lay dead on the ground, surrounded by fire and 2 dead fire ants. It appeared he had fought them and then died of his wounds. I could only assume this was the kid's dad. I went to find the kid and let him know the bad news. He took it well, better than I would have assumed, or even I would have taken the news if someone had told me my dad had passed away.
He's dead? I guess I already knew. Besides, I'm too tired to cry anymore.
He said he already knew in a way, and yet I still felt terrible for him. So I offered to help him some more and promised I would put a stop to whatever the source was so that nobody else could suffer the way this kid did. The buildings in Grey Ditch were broken and crumbled. Years of disrepair evident. Yet, this was a group of people's homes at some point. And now it was swarming with fire ants, ready to spit fire and fight over land that might have belonged to their smaller, less deadly ancestors. In a way, I guess nature was taking over, in a morbid kind of way. It was scary. I could only assume they had mutated when the bombs dropped. Nothing else could explain this level of mutation and growth. Or explain that they now lived up to their name in a literal sense. I searched the entire compound until I came across the subway. Nowhere else had been successful in finding the source, but they seemed to be coming in waves from this subway. By all means, that would be the best place to look. The subway was dark, crumbled bricks littering the floor along with paper. It smelled just as bad as it looked. Stale air, and as surprising as it should have been, the very faint smell of smoke and fire. It was an odd smell, both stale and yet fresh due to the ant life living in the dank hallways of the subway. Boxes scattered on shelves, both open and sealed, empty and full. It was as if whatever did happen on the surface never fully reached the underground, leaving it in an awkward type of time freeze. Never moving forward, and no raid to move back. I guess this would have been a short comfort to those alive at the time when the bombs fell, those that seek shelter hoping to survive the blast. Littered in the hallways were more ants, alive and hostile, ready to fight anybody stepping foot in their territory. Unfortunately for them, it was me, and while my time on the surface has so far been short compared to others, I was a dab hand at armed combat. I had my dad and Jonas to thank for that. Accompanying those ants were skeletons, bare and stripped naked of any clothing or flesh. It made me wonder, what lives did they live before the bombs fell? Did they have a family and were on their way home? Or were they lonely and sad, and the bombs falling granted them a silent plea to end everything? I would never know, and in a way I didn't want to know. It would not help them now, and it would not help me. The tunnels were a labyrinth of corridors, paths blocked by fallen walls and broken trains. Just as I was on the verge of giving up finding the source of the problems and leaving to forget about the kid, I finally ran into a man in a lab coat. He said he worked in this very underground. He was performing experiments. He complained that he couldn't reach the terminal. Being curious, I asked him to elaborate. The man explained everything and asked me to take care of the nest guardians so that he could reach the terminal to stop the ants doing what they were doing. They instead would attack each other. An ant genocide. I agreed to do the work for him, and he was relieved. Counting my supplies, I noticed I was running low on ammo. I would have liked to be more conservative of it, but something told me I couldn't. I was glad I kept my baseball bat, but how well it would go against nest guardians, I didn't know. If the fire ants so far were only representatives of half the strength the nest guardians had, I would struggle. Still, I promised the kid I would stop it, so I pushed myself forward further underground to take care of the problem. Further underground introduced a far more stuffier air. The smell of dirt was stronger. Lights were set up and powered by smaller generators, a sign that the doctor from above visited regularly. I found the nest guardians. My thoughts from earlier were right. They were tougher, stronger. The fire packed more heat and sprayed from their mouths with far more force than the ants above. It was going to be tough. As I quietly moved through the muggy tunnels, I began using my remaining bullets on the nest guardians I came across. I kept fumbling with my aim. Normally I was so good, but the walls made it claustrophobic. I felt trapped. My heart raced at the thought of being in these tunnels for a prolonged amount of time. The irony was not lost on me. I lived in tunnels all my life, and yet, being outside in the open world had made me feel more free. I yearned to return to the surface as quickly as possible, to soak in the sun that beamed down onto the wastelands. I was pathetic, really. Pushing those dire thoughts aside, I found the queen ant and soon another nest guardian. I had ran out of bullets not too long ago. To make life easier, I started laying down traps to kill the remaining ant guardians. That did the trick effectively for me, and soon my work was done. I quickly began making my way back to the doctor's subway laboratory. The quicker I could leave, the better. I told him the good news, told him I took care of the nest guardians, and that the queen was unharmed.
Oh, how marvelous! Please, tell me what happened.
He said I was useful. After a quick discussion, I left him and made a hasty return to the surface. And more importantly, to the kid who was waiting for my return. I didn't want to disappoint or worry him. He already had enough bad news for the day without adding my non-return on top. I left the subway a different way than the way I came in from. I found a tape and gave it a quick listen to see what it was about.
If you're listening to this tape, then my brains are splattered all over a wall somewhere, and you've got a job to do. You need to retrieve the package and get it safely to Ronald Lauren and Girdershade. Tell him Grady sent you. To get the package, you'll need the key. I've stashed it inside an old fire hose case in some maintenance closet in Marigold Metro Station. The key will unlock the safe that contains the package. Look for the room marked by a spinning light. You can't miss it. Good luck. And hopefully, they won't find you too.
I made a note about it mentally. If it was on the way, I would check it out. Maybe it would help someone else out, if they were still alive. By the time I left the subway, it was dark. I hoped the kid had remained in his hiding spot. I made my way quickly to it, decided to check out that first before resorting to searching his house. The kid was still there, and I was relieved. I told him I had solved the problem for him. The source of the fire ants were now neutralised. It wouldn't hurt anyone else, as long as that crazy doctor didn't decide to undo whatever it was he was doing. I was glad he was safe, and while he was upset that he couldn't give me anything, I would have rejected it anyway. I had one last job to do for him, and that was to find someone else to look after him. So I met him back at his house and asked where was the best place I could look for him. He said he had a cousin called Vera in Rivet City. I didn't know where that was, but I promised him I'd find this person. I said my goodbyes and left his house. I made my way back to Megaton, deciding it was best to maybe pick up some ammo and restock on supplies. I spoke to a man who called himself Jericho. He was rough and rude, but I guess the wastelands made everyone that way eventually. Our exchange ended just as quickly as it began. I explored Megaton and found a water processing plant. Inside was a man who appeared to be working on the plant by himself. When I asked him, he confirmed my suspicions. He asked me to repair the leaks, and I asked him how many there were. He said there were 3 or 4, and so I agreed to help him. If it meant the people of this town could have cleaner water, then taking time out of searching for Dad was worth it. I walked to one of the pipes I knew was leaking, the pipe near the entrance of the city. On close inspection, it looked worse than I originally thought. I would need to find a book and read up on how to repair leaking pipes. I just hope there was still one intact to be able to do so. If not, I would just need to figure it out. I left Megaton again, vowing I'd come back soon to repair those pipes. I felt like I owed the citizens, and more importantly, I kind of owe Jenny, as I did take her caps from the safe. I don't believe she knows it was me, and I don't plan on telling her either. I made my way back to the old metro station I'd come across from when I met that terrified man. He was still scared and unable to speak, so I was unable to tell him the news of Grey Ditch. Deciding to leave him alone, I entered the metro station. A shiver ran through my spine as I entered the cramped tunnels once more. I took a deep breath and found myself thinking back to the vault. Would the others be sympathetic if they knew a former vault dweller had suddenly developed an adverse reaction to being in narrow, cramped hallways? Halls that they grew up in, all because they had a taste of an open world. A martyr probably wouldn't, and maybe Butch wouldn't either now, but the others I was not sure. In my unsure thoughts, I had accidentally locked the computer terminal, locking myself out of deploying a Protectron. I just hope I didn't need it. As I explored the underground, I was attacked by more mutant mole rats. I had forgotten to buy ammo in Megaton, so I resorted to hitting them with my bat. I walked deeper into the underground station. Apart from those few mole rats, it was quiet and peaceful, but it didn't escape my notice that there was a touch of hostility in the air, and once I walked up some stairs, I spotted why. A group of people in a cage. They acted weird. They moved weird. They looked like Gob from behind, and yet the way they moved was not like him. It almost wasn't human. Maybe they weren't human. But I needed to get through the gate, and to do so, I needed to dispose of them. So I unlocked the gate and laid down some mines. That quickly wiped out the group of ghouls. I grimaced as I overstepped them. They looked exactly like Gob, and yet I knew they weren't like Gob at all. I couldn't link the two. It wasn't fair to the ghoul in Megaton. I managed to find some ammo and quickly pocketed it, telling myself I needed as much as I could get a hold of, and once I filled my pockets, I left the dead bodies behind. It would get easier. It had to get easier. My travels only made me meet more ghouls, so I disposed of them the same way I got rid of the others below. I was beginning to get lost until I found a pair of radroaches. I decided to follow them, and doing so led me to a new area guarded by a giant man. At least, I think he was a man. I could tell because as soon as he spotted me, he ran at me, holding something heavy in his hands. I ran backwards, throwing down mines that did nothing to him. That's what it seemed like anyway. Despite what I thought, it was easy to take him down with my bat. I could only guess the mines did do more damage to him than I thought. I wouldn't always be that lucky, I reminded myself. Eventually, I found the exit on the metro station. I felt relieved to finally have fresh air. That relief soon disappeared when I was shot at by more of those giant-looking, green-skinned men. I stepped backwards and closed my eyes tight, hoping whatever end was coming would be quick.
You don't need to worry. All right, now that's what I'm talking about.
That end never came. Instead, those men lay dead. I walked towards a group of people in bulky armor. A woman caught my attention. She called those men super mutants. More importantly, she said they were heading to Galaxy News Radio, and they were heading back to be their backup. She said I could tag along. That was perfect. I jumped at the chance and began following the women in bulky armor to Galaxy News Radio station.
The entire city is crawling with super mutants. Now, if you'll excuse me.